Thank you guys for coming out tonight for the launch of Oscar Tuazon's new book. I'm just going to give a really short introduction. I feel like we're going to do like duet karaoke right now. But you can use that one too, though. But so Oscar is from Seattle, but now lives in LA since the last 2 years. Has a studio a couple doors down from here, and so Oscar had this exhibition in February at the Ludwig Museum, curated by Philip Kaiser, and that's what the book is centered around. And what else? And he's going to have a show later this year in New York at Macaron Gallery with his brother Eli, who he sometimes collaborates with. Cool. Thanks for coming to do this.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I wanted to start out talking about my bed. This was in my apartment in Paris, and when I first moved in there, I couldn't afford a studio. I wanted to have a studio, and we had a guest room in the apartment. You can see behind this door there, there was like a small little guest room, and it had a bed in it. So I moved the bed out into the living room, and I built like a floor over it. This kind of, you can see it open now, but actually you could close it also with a couple sheets of plywood. This is the floor and some benches, and that freed up some space in the guest room so that I could use it as my studio. It was never meant to be an artwork. It was just this kind of weirdly pragmatic solution to a life problem, and a couple years later, there was a fire in the building below us, and so we had to move out of the building, and I couldn't take this thing with me. I had no way to hold on to it, but I had a show coming up, so I just moved it out. You can actually see the outlines of the apartment there, kind of, the floor, some information about the space, but I moved out and just displaced it for this show in London, and it was a really strangely traumatic experience. I mean, for me, it was actually really funny. I thought it was kind of amazing to see this thing torn out of its context. But I brought my kids there, and it just freaked them out, as you can imagine, because it was like their living room, but it wasn't their house. And there was something about that experience that was very real. And I don't know if just the distance between these two spaces, the displacement. I eventually found a studio in a squat. It's called Le General. It's up just outside of Paris in Sèvres. There were probably 30 studios in the building, and maybe of those 10 10 or so people lived there in that building. I started out and I had a space in the basement, and eventually somebody left and I got this much nicer space. I took that over. I would do some work in the studio, but it wasn't so big, so I would leave things sort of half finished and put them on the truck and then finish them in the exhibition space. I had no idea what I was doing. It was, I think, for me, always kind of an illicit thrill to arrive at an exhibition and have just a truckload of material and some tools and a kind of a half-formed idea of what would be in the show, how large the works would be, how they were going to be built. Knowing that it could go wrong was kind of exciting, I guess. The risk of something falling over or falling apart. After a show, usually the works would be destroyed. You know, I guess I made the exhibition space kind of an extension of the studio. I would move in there and live there for a week, working. One of the things I realized early on was that no matter what you put inside of an exhibition space, it's kind of an empty space. It's a void. It's a black hole. It's empty. The characteristic of any exhibition space is that it's empty. It's always going to be empty. It's kind of a horrifying existential condition that no matter what you do as an artist, as a sculptor, there's no way of filling that space. It's essentially uninhabitable. So the basic problem, or my problem, is how to inhabit that space. It's a kind of inhabitation that's always being foreclosed. It's always being emptied out, evacuated. It's a space of impermanence. A museum or a gallery is always going to be in some way a model home, a model of a house, a model home. But it's ambiguous whether it's a hospitable or inhospitable space, whether it's there's always this like alienation from the sense of touch, bodily alienation. Well, there's this artist who maybe you've heard of, Glenn Cedar. He did an amazing body of work. I don't know, in the 90s, I guess, where he would recreate one space in another. So one show he did here at Gagosian was he took a Banco Popular check cashing place from somewhere in Echo Park and recreated it at the Gagosian Gallery in Beverly Hills. He had another great project in San Francisco where he just took the sidewalk outside of the gallery and rebuilt it inside the gallery. Like, exactly, there was a telephone pole, there was a sidewalk, some graffiti, and he just copied every detail so that when you walked in the door, you kind of had deja vu of, you're walking over the sidewalk twice, the same sidewalk twice. I became Glenn Cedar for a little while. I do cover versions of other people's work. I don't really give a damn. I think that for me, the so-called conceptual part of being an artist is really the least interesting. It's really fine for me to just take somebody else's idea and do my own version of it. And I thought that what Glenn Cedar had done was really it was amazing, but I guess I felt like in that work there was this kind of space between the original and the copy, right? That there's a space between the object and its replica. This like space opened up by the act of displacement, a little bit like that space of seeing my bedroom in an art gallery. It was, I guess I feel like it's kind of this contradiction, but a replica doesn't actually reinforce the original. It denigrates or disintegrates the original. It like reduces a thing to just pure material, in the sense that now when you have a copy of something, you have to bear with me. This is all like new stuff. But I felt like by having the double, by having the replica of the thing, it actually reduces it's almost like the only value of the original is as a referent. It's a well, apparently I'm not able to even talk about it, but this space exists. I swear to God, it exists, and I knew somehow, or I felt that it existed. It's there's a lot of spaces in sculpture that we talk about, like the space over the pedestal, or like the space over a Carl Andre or something like that, and it's pretty abstract. Like this is one of those spaces, like the space between the original and the replica, the space of displacement. Is that bullshit? Does it exist? I wanted to know. I wanted to find out, and so I built that piece, and Well, I thought it was, it's still, to me, an actual physical, material, spatial experience. That's pretty cool. The project of sculpture is to pervert the world. That's what I want to do. A sculpture itself is pathetic. It's in the sense that it's powerless. It's an embarrassment, an object that has no existence without language. It's necessarily fragmentary, incomplete, a prosthetic, an incomplete sentence, a part word, part object. To speak, it needs people. Sculpture is like a reflected light. What's interesting or powerful about it isn't the object itself, but how it changes the things around it. Like the object could be whatever. The most important feature of a room is a door, open or closed. I made these doorways, these simple frames that exist inside the space of a wall. There's nothing really to look at. It's just a passage through a wall. You step on this little platform, and it has a kind of lo-fi Fred Sandback mime effect, where you feel like maybe you're walking through a plane of glass or a mirror. It's almost nothing. There's nothing to it really, but it's a space. This is another one of those kind of space experiments. It's an old Richard Serra tune called Delineator, and you know, the description of that piece is always that there's like the space is compressed, that you're kind of in this zone of compression and tension between these two sheets of Corten steel. And I made my version where the platform on the ground is just a concrete slab, but then above you have a frame with like pool, like a plexiglass sheets and pools of water, like rusty water dripping down onto you. It's really kind of sweaty and disgusting in a way. Pools of water overhead. Cracked glass underfoot, rust and water dripping from the ceiling, glue and sand, clear tubes filled with chalky water, beads of water trapped in glass. This is a piece that's like built suspended from a chain hoist there, you can see. And it just collapsed under its own weight. A work makes its own space. The work I wanted to make a structure that was inseparable from the space, like in a really literal way. So this is a structure that's It's at the Kunsthal Bern, and this is it's the classical modern exhibition space. It was maybe the first museum that was built expressly to show contemporary art, but it has this weird hangover or holdover from bourgeois, like a bourgeois townhouse, you would say. Like you feel that you're walking into the foyer, and then there's a big sitting room and a bedroom over here, a bedroom over there. It really has like the layout and the scheme of a bourgeois townhouse, but it's just blown up to a kind of bigger scale. And I wanted to do something in all the rooms, so I just designed a structure that was big enough to pass through all of these spaces, literally, and cut holes in the wall where the structure passed from one room to another. I guess I was trying to make something also that really didn't need a space. I feel like one of the negative effects of minimalism is that people started to pay too much attention to architecture. Who cares? It's just a room. It doesn't really... The characteristics of any particular room aren't that important or interesting. A work can make its own room. It can be a space for other things to happen. This is the structure is arbitrary. It's just a crude way of producing spatial effects. What it looks like doesn't really matter. And it's this modular system that I came up with based on it was at the Whitney Museum, and they have within the code, there are these kind of definitions of a body. I mean, it's never explicitly stated, right? But like, you need to have certain height for people to pass under. If you make something, you need to. I'm no architect, but like these. Within the God, why is it so hard to explain this simple thing? It's there's minimum like wheelchair turnarounds and minimum heights for people to duck under, and so I started thinking about that, and trying to kind of establish the minimum module for one person, like as defined by the building code, or not even the building code, but the requirements of the exhibition. So I came up with this module that was, I guess, 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet, and I built a bunch of them, and made a kind of maze in the first phase of the exhibition. And then, like, halfway through the exhibition, we had an event, and I designed this whole structure with this in mind, because, oh my God, oops. Oh, I'm sorry, this is supposed to be a video, but, oh, yeah, there it is. So in the second phase of the exhibition, we took it upstairs and erected it into a completely different structure that could be used by my friend Kate Hardy. She was doing a fashion show and she needed like a catwalk. So I made it my project to like design and build the catwalk for her. But so it was this thing that didn't have any real form. It was a formless, undefined thing. And what it looked like was irrelevant. A sculpture isn't something you look at. I don't need to see what I'm doing. I work blind. A sculpture is the thing for bodies. A stage, a runway, a platform, a utilitarian sculpture. A formless thing that could change depending on what it was used for, where it was. A thing that can't even stand up on its own, inseparable from the space around it. A sculpture serves a purpose. It needs a reason. It serves as a person. It serves a person. It's formless, adaptable, unstable, placeless, nameless. When it wears out, you just replace it. If it rots, you rebuild it. It's replaceable, replace it. Waste it. Transitory, temporary. A person without a body who can adjust to different rooms, climates, spaces. I started making furniture. I was listening to extreme music and working the angle grinder without ear protection. I lived with a high tone ringing in my ears. We were busy. I lived to make things. I felt that the possibility of altering the physical world around me was real and imminent. That a single chair, if constructed in a particular way, had the power to physically transform its environment. I fervently believe this. I occasionally saw it happening with my own eyes. I swear I felt it. It's intoxicating. I was making things that were not meant to be. I was bringing a new order into being. It's pricey. This is a demonstration of that. It's on the top of this marble pedestal is an induction stovetop. You can see the cord running out of the bottom there. And the sculpture on top is stainless steel. So for anybody who's used an induction stovetop, you know that it only heats up if you put a metallic object onto the surface. So there you have it. It's a hot sculpture. It's pricey. Currency. It's a form of currency. Three-dimensional money without a face on it. It's faceless. Priceless. Gold. Gold, a cold form of gold, hard cash. Use it for what it's used for. I went to Alaska. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't handle it anymore. I wanted to work outside. My brother and I, we went to Kodiak, Alaska, and we built that cabin. I wanted to put it to the test. I wanted to work outside. I wanted to test it. I wanted to get arrested. It was cold out and wet. I went outside at night without a light. I got high. I got wet. I never got dry. You start to cry. You start to wonder what a house is. A house is a roof. That's it. It's a roof over your head. To build a house, you start with the roof. Why can't a sculpture be a house? That's kind of what I was asking myself. Why can't a sculpture be a house? I mean, why not move in and live there? The object is just there to generate an electric field. But the electric field is the work. That's air. A sculpture could be a place. The work can replace the world. It's a place, a space. There are a few people who've done this. Not artists or architects, but people who have chosen to submit themselves to space. I spent a lot of time when I was young visiting dome builders, old hippies, people who lived in domes. And what you realize is that by building this kind of house, you decide to subject yourself to architecture. You adapt. You submit. The structure takes on its own life. It takes precedence. It takes over your life. You're just an occupant, surrounded, an inhabitant. Burton Holly Davis, this is a true story. Maybe some of you know Dwelling Portably. It's this little zine published out of Oregon, a post office box in Oregon. Burton Holly Davis have lived in the Oregon woods in a structure like this one for 30 years or so. Their reasons are pretty simple. They want to explore an absolute, uncompromising personal freedom. And that means no attachments, obligations, or responsibilities to anyone else. It's a lifestyle that requires a kind of total commitment. I built this one myself, and I tried to live in it, which was a complete disaster. But I think, you know, this is a piece from like 2007 or something, and I've thought about it and talked about it a lot. But I think today I was trying to figure it out, what that thing is, and I think what's interesting about it is that it's a structure that's not a house at all. It's more like a sculpture. You could say it's a sculpture of a house, but it's really just this weird sculpture that they decided to live in. It's intentionally invisible. My version you probably can't tell, but it's built into a hillside, and it's angled. The roof should be angled in such a way that it doesn't cast any reflected light. So it's really virtually invisible. And they talk a lot about that, about reducing the visibility of the structure, making it invisible, making it disappear, keeping a low profile. It's a structure that's entirely determined by this kind of ruthless economy, this like bare utility. But it's almost impossible to live in. It's an uninhabitable space, an uncomfortable space. A structure that forces you to live outside. And I think that it's actually this structure itself that generates this very vivid and very real experience of freedom that they talk about. They call it invulnerability. The idea is that by not having any ties or any obligations to anybody else, you're invulnerable to any kind of form of coercion. What kind of artwork could produce these kind of effects? That's a sculpture makes a space for other things to happen. It's a stage, a backdrop. It needs to disappear. This was a piece of a ship. I cut this piece of a boat and made it into kind of a stage with a little light there, so at night you could go and just a little something to do. I'm not really sure what people did with it. This is the point in the evening where my notes run out. So that's a structure that's built around a tree, and it's just this little cube, a place out of the sun. Kind of, it's in a way, it's kind of an anonymous looking structure in a park. This is another one with a tree. And I guess at this point, you know, like the work is more and more outdoors. And when you're working outdoors, what happens to me, what's interesting about this particular work is the space, not so much like the objects themselves, but this space that happens between them, that it creates some kind of zone or traffic between these two things. There's this interior space that is still kind of open to the elements, and it's formed by a collapse. So we built it upright, and the smaller of the two, like, table forms, we tipped over, and then the second one tipped over against that, and the weight of them leaning against each other supported the structure. It was self-supporting. You can see the cracks in it. And it was intended, it was like for the Venice Biennial. And, you know, the whole idea of that show is that it's national pavilions. And the curator wanted to make like extra pavilions in addition to the national pavilions. So this is one of those. It's an idea that I liked a lot because it was, the idea of doing a pavilion is like, it's just an empty space for something else to happen. So there were performances inside the structure. There's a painting on one side of it, a mural. And then it was also just a thing that you could sit in out of the sun. But it was also, I don't know, it took a long time to produce the piece. It took like a month. And I became really attuned to the life of the thing before it was publicly accessible, and the life after. You know, this kind of this is one of the performances, Carl Holmquist reading some poems there. And I think, to me, it really fulfilled that that dream of a thing that extends beyond its own physical limits and has the ability to infect the world around it somehow. This is another kind of pavilion, I guess you could say. It's built, it's a concrete structure that incorporates a couple of trees. You can see here it's connected to two trees, like acting as posts. And This is like a steam whistle. It's like a fireplace, I guess you could say, that has a water tank. Like the top portion of it is a water tank, and there's a boiler inside of it. And so when you start the fire, it boils the water. And on the side, yeah, you can kind of see on the right side there, there's a steam whistle, it's like a locomotive whistle. So when when the water boils, it whistles. And this is a fountain. It's this tree that's been drilled out. It's got a couple holes in it. You can see where the tree is wet. It's not like a big fountain, but just water seeps out of it along the bark and kind of trickles down the bark. So when you touch the tree, it's always wet. And it's also something. It's a kind of system that is set up to change over time. It has like this situation that will change it over time. And that's a basketball hoop with a handball wall. So yeah, I guess there's these two games happening at the same time, or it could happen at the same time. I always thought it is maybe funny to bring those two things in such a tight proximity to each other, that basketball and handball could be happening simultaneously on this thing. Sorry. This is another, it's like a block of marble in a tree. And it's, I guess, it's something also that will change and develop over time. We don't really know if the tree is going to grow around the block of marble, or maybe it's already fallen out of the tree. I don't know. It's another fountain. This is from my first solo show back in 2007. And for that show, I wanted to build a house. I had this idea. I had this kind of house in my mind. I had an idea of the space in my mind. And so I tried to build little sections of it. I built this piece of wall that had water inside of it, and some kind of desk/chair, bench, bed thing. It's from the same era as like the bed I showed at the beginning. this is a piece I did with my brother, actually, and it is, we wanted to make a beer bottle that was also a brick that that you could, like, a stackable beer bottle. It's based on an old Heineken idea. They actually tried this in the 60s. The president of Heineken, he had visited a slum in Caracas, and he saw all these beer bottles on the ground, and he thought maybe he could kill two birds with one stone and clean up all the beer bottles on the ground and turn them into building material. So he designed a beer bottle that was rectangular, flat, with these little nubs and an interlocking neck that would fit into the depression on the bottom of the next beer bottle. So it was really a whole building system. They produced maybe 200,000 of these bottles, and they never got released. It was maybe a project whose time hadn't come yet, but we picked it up and we made our own kind of beer bottle, and then a section of wall. This is a section of wall again. This one, like, fills up with water, or that was the idea. It was meant to be a kind of passive solar wall that, like, I had this idea of a structure whose walls would be filled with water, and so during the day the water would heat up and keep the space temperate at night. But what happened when I filled this up with water is that it, as you can see, it just leaked everywhere, and I kind of made a diaper around the bottom of the piece to try and contain it. It was at this tiny little gallery in Paris that I started with some friends called Castillo Corrales, and this show was in January or February, and we didn't really have heat in the space, so the water on the floor became really a problem. Like, it became this acute problem in the space to anybody who visited for the opening. You're standing there in like January or February, and your feet are soaking wet, and it was really kind of unpleasant. And to me, that it somehow collapsed these two spaces in a way that I hadn't anticipated at all, and that was really physical and material, and I guess in a way, the work that I'm doing now, this is a pretty recent project. The work that I'm doing now, I think, is kind of based on that attempt to collapse a couple different spaces together. So this is it's a gallery show, and it's this big space in Zurich, Everpersenüber, and when I was preparing for this show, I've now have a cabin in the woods that I'm building, that I'm kind of like working on as a project. And when I was preparing for the show, I looked at the floor plan and I thought, you know what, I probably could fit part of, maybe all of this cabin in the space. And sure enough, I could, like with plenty of space to spare, actually. But you can see there is the floor. I just built the floor at full scale there in the space, and then like a section of wall, and so somehow collapsing those two spaces together. It doesn't really, I don't know, everybody could say this, but pictures don't really do it justice somehow. It's really, it was a space that existed for that short little time, and what was interesting about it was really in the like collapse or collision of those two spaces. I had an idea for a window. I mean, it's kind of it's also a cover version of an old solar idea, to like have a window that could fill up with insulated material at night so that you can retain the heat in the house, and then suck it back out during the day so that you could see out the window. But to me, it was this brilliant, clumsy contradiction, like a window that is opaque, that you can't, a window that you can't see through. The reason why they're all different is that I could never quite figure out how to make this system work. So I used a different kind of motor each time and tried to prototype this thing, and none of the approaches really worked, but it was a kind of process of trial and error. No, I didn't. I just like showed them because I didn't really, that part I couldn't quite figure out. They couldn't run continuously. But it's one of those projects that hopefully, given some time, I could figure it out. So we're coming to the end here. Don't worry. This is at the Ludwig Museum, and again, this is a kind of, I mean, I feel like a museum always has built into it this projective function, where it's a space you can go and imagine being somewhere else, project yourself into another space, another place. And so that, coupled with the fact that you can't touch anything, that there's this prohibition on touching things, it puts you like in, I guess that's what we call the condition of being a viewer, right? This strange atemporal kind of dream state where you're imagining being somewhere else. And I wanted to recreate that sensation of trying to imagine another place, like being in the museum and being forced to imagine another space or another place in your mind. So I took my house here in LA and made a model of it, like reconstructed it and built some sections of it full scale. Of course, the materials are completely different. And here, like, this is a staircase, and I tipped it over so that you have another strange little room formed by the stairwell. This is a garage door slash landing for the staircase. And this section of wall that intersects and bisects the staircase. And finally, as you go up that I'll kind of describe it to you. As you go, the exhibition was more or less on this staircase, the main staircase of the museum. And as you go up this staircase, you walk up past this piece, and you get to the top, and there's a revolving door and a small terrace, this kind of small, weird, neglected terrace in the museum that you can just go out. There wasn't anything there when I discovered it, and I liked the fact that it was this kind of neglected. It's like a place you'd go and like smoke cigarettes if you're a teenager, and I think that's basically what it was used for. I wanted to put something there, and so I just recreated that revolving door. You can see the original behind it there, and I just did my best copy of that revolving door there. So when you come out, you go again in a circle and go back downstairs. Well, I think that's more or less all I have to say. Thank you. If there's any questions. Yeah.
Hello? Yeah.
Great.
So I just see in your work like a lot of kind of, I don't know, almost like aggression towards the viewer. And like alienation. I don't know, and if that's something you think about, or if that's, I mean, for example, that, like cutting these trees apart and like rooting them out, shutting water systems through them, or the like basketball hoop, the lights on top. Reminded me a lot of like a sort of like a prison
Yeah, definitely the Venice piece is really freaky. It's really doesn't feel good to be in there because it's like it has that Richard Serra effect of like a curved. It's not a curved wall, but a tilted wall. So it already destabilizes your sense of walking around. But then you also know that it's kind of crumbling and falling apart. That's definitely a charged environment. I mean, the other ones like the basketball, all the stuff with trees. I don't know. I actually, I see your point, but personally, I find those like really the friendliest works. You know what I mean? Like, because a tree is basically. What I like about a tree is that, like, no matter how big it is, how like monumental it is, it's still gonna be human scale. You know what I mean? Because it has this like a life, right? Even when a tree is dead, it's still living somehow. It's like it's a part of a living. It's a living material. And so I always find those pieces are super approachable, and people like to hang out there. And I don't know, but I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, I just feel like, because obviously what I'm like really well, I guess that a sculpture is probably like that alienation effect that you're talking about is necessary in order for it to act on the objects around it. Because that to me is what it all comes down to. Is like the object itself is really, it's really irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, like, it could, I mean, it has to be something, but it could be anything. What is important is like how it reflects on other objects around it. So there is inherently a sense of alienation in that description already, because it's something that places itself outside of the normal transit and communication of and function of other objects. Like it says like, I'm different, you know.
Have you ever seen someone do a cover version of one of your artworks?
What's that?
Have you ever seen someone do a cover version of one of your artworks?
Oh, I don't know. No, I don't think so.
How would you feel if you did?
I think that would be cool. Yeah, I mean, depending, of course, but no, I think aside from Glenn Burton, I've covered, I did a bunch of Scott Burton pieces, and I just think it's like it's a good way to like get working. You cut through the kind of the hard work of coming up with an idea and yeah, I mean, it's funny also that like probably a majority of the things I showed tonight don't exist anymore. Like they really are immaterial. They're like performance sculpture or something, and so yeah, it would be really interesting to see like how something like that gets rebuilt or reinterpreted, even. For myself, like there are certain works that don't exist anymore, and I know that like if I did them again, it would be different, you know. So yeah, I would be into it.
I've seen a cover version of one of your works.
Cool.
I saw it's not exactly a cover version, but a piece that someone did that was a hot water boiler, and like that same tactic, but a shower. It used it to power a shower in like a little cabin in northern New York, and I know that the artist was probably like looking at your work. So
Wow, nice, cool.
they're out there.
Yeah.
I think it was after your notes had already run out, and you said, I think you were talking about the handball, basketball hoop.
Yeah.
And you said, and I like the idea that these sculptures, and then there was this long pause, and I was thinking, takes on a life of their own.
Yeah.
And you said, infected. I thought, well, that's what infection is. It's like it's a new life there. But I had a more positive spin on it. But
yeah,
awesome.
I mean,
They're awesome.
Infected. I don't know if it's exactly the right metaphor, but I really feel like it's sorry.
Is it after the notes so that you were looking for a word?
Yeah, I was searching for that one. Yeah,
I was like trying to.
I don't know what other word I would use, but. I don't know. Like, it's also, I mean, in a piece like that, what's interesting is, especially when you go outside, I think what I was really trying to grapple with, and the reason I didn't quite like finish, come to a conclusion tonight, is that I was trying to understand, you know, I started out working inside in the exhibition space and engaging the problematics of like what an exhibition is and like what to do in that space, and the parameters are so fixed and easy to perceive in that environment. And once you go outside, what's really interesting is that that piece particularly doesn't have any, it's really hard to delimit like what it is, right? It's like it is the thing, but then it's also like part of a game, and people interact with it, and so its boundaries expand slightly outwards, and it includes a certain zone or bubble around it, but we don't know exactly how much, and that is really interesting to me. That's what I mean by infect the space around it. Like, it's this thing that, like, you know, can kind of spill over to the park bench next to it, or the bike path or whatever, and like it almost could transform another object in its proximity or incorporate it. Yeah. Is that it? I just want to say thanks, everybody, for coming. It was kind of it's like still in process what I'm working on tonight, and it was, I appreciated being able to like work it out on stage. Thanks.